Uh, okay, so you're saying good morning and welcome from New York, or welcome and good morning from New York. I'm very happy to have you all here for today's webinar, Graduate Student Panel on Admissions. This public webinar is a part of Cientifico Latino Inc. Graduate Student Mentorship Initiative curriculum and is being recorded. I'm Dr. Melendez, Dennis Melendez, your host and program director at Cientifico Latino. And now, without any further ado, I'd like to briefly introduce our panelists. Yasmin Bud is a first-generation low-income Latina DESI PhD student in counseling psychology at Columbia University. She graduated from Columbia University with a master's in clinical psychology and a bachelor's in psychology and women's gender and sexuality studies from the same institution. Her research focuses on multicultural gender and reproductive issues across psychosocial contexts, with an emphasis on how structural and systemic factors shape mental health and reproductive identity. Samantha Lee is a neuroscience PhD student at the University of Washington and Allen Institute, studying the electrophysiological and transcriptomic properties of neuronal cell types in the ventral striatum. Prior to graduate school, she was a postbac fellow at the NIH, where she co-developed a novel mouse model to study social reward. Her long-term goal is to bridge basic neuroscience with translational research in addiction and mental health. Jarildy Javier is a senior neuroscience PhD student in the lab of Dr. Malavika Murugan at Emory University, originally from NYC. Jari attended Colby College in Waterville, uh, Maine, um, where she majored biology with a concentration in ecology and evolution. After taking a couple gap years, she completed an NIH prep postbac at Northwestern University in the lab of Dr. Tiffany Schmidt. Now at Emory, her thesis work focuses on the role of several brain regions in reward-related decision-making in social and non-social contexts in mice. When she's not in the lab, Jolly likes to get little treats with her friends, uh, explore new places, and listen to podcasts. She is an SFN Neuroscience Scholar, HHMI Gilliam Fellow, and Boucher Scholar. Thank you all so much for being here today with us. So why don't we take a moment for you to introduce yourselves, and let's start in the same order I introduced you. So Yasmin, you first, please.
Sure, that sounds good. So first of all, I'm so happy to be here. Thank you for waking up early to be here with us. Um,
Yes.
so I feel like you gave a really good overview of my background, but I guess I'll just add a few little things. So hello everyone, I'm Yasmin. I'm a very proud first gen low income student. I'm a counseling psychology doc student at Teachers College, which is under the umbrella of Columbia, which is something that I learned once I started as well. I also did my master's in clinical psychology at Teachers College, and my my undergrad at Columbia as well in psychology and gender studies. So I've been there for a very long time, but my path to my doc program was not as simple as that. So um, after I did my master's in clinical psychology, while I was doing my master's as well, I was a full-time program coordinator at the Institute for Research on Women's Gender and Sexuality Studies. So if anyone is also doing school and work both full-time, I get it. I've been there. It's very hard. Um, so I actually did a pivot from a program in clinical psychology to counseling psychology. So that's a little tidbit in my introduction that's not in there. So after I finished my master's in clinical psychology in 2024, um, I applied to PhD programs. Um, Sorry, I finished my master's in 2023. I took a year to kind of prep for the cycle. I applied to PhD programs in 2024 in clinical psychology. And I got into a few programs, and to be honest, none felt like a perfect fit. And that's something that I kind of had to sit with, that finding the perfect fit is not really real. You just find the best fit. Um, and I started a program in clinical psychology. I realized that it wasn't exactly for me, so I pivoted. So I transferred to a program in counseling psychology this past fall, and that feels like a much better fit. So I've actually been through the admissions process twice. Um, so just sharing that to say that it's not the end all be all. You can pivot and change, and that um, you don't have to feel stuck if that's how you feel, and that many people go through the cycle more than one time. So that's me.
Thank you. So, Samantha.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for having me and being here on this early morning. I'm excited to be here and share about my personal experience. My name is Samantha Lee, and as Dr. Melendez shared, I'm a second year neuroscience PhD student at the University of Washington, and I conduct my dissertation research at the Allen Institute as part of the Human Cell Types team. I'm originally from Northern Virginia, and I graduated from Virginia Commonwealth University, where I majored in biology and minored in chemistry. I was also part of the Honors College and the 8-year BSMD program. And after graduating in 3 years, I joined the National Institute on Drug Abuse as an NIH postbac fellow. I contributed to a couple of different projects, including an independent project on male CD1 mice, which resulted in a first author publication. And I also worked on developing novel tools such as hybrid transgenic mice. And while I initially planned to pursue an MD PhD, I ultimately chose a PhD in neuroscience because during my postbac, I discovered a deep passion for research, and I want to become a leader in a field that combines my interests in biology, chemistry, psychology. And so a PhD in neuroscience became the ideal next step to develop my knowledge, my research skills, with the long-term goal of running an independent research program. And I was very fortunate to have a successful application cycle. I applied in 2023 to start in fall 2024. And I credit my success to the support of my mentors and also the NIH training office. And I want to highlight that some of their resources, including their workshops, are open to the public. And I believe they post their recordings on YouTube. So you definitely, if you're interested, can check out their website and their YouTube channel. And now that I'm in grad school, I'm committed to paying it forward. At UW, I'm involved in the Neuroscience Mentorship Program, which supports prospective students who are applying to the program. And I also serve on our program's recruitment, curriculum, and events committee. And outside of UW, I'm a former Cientifico Latino GSMI alumni mentee and now mentor, and I'm happy to answer any and all questions that y'all have.
Thanks so much.
Hi everyone. Sorry if my voice is weird. I've been getting over a cold. But my name is Jarildy. I also go by Jadi. As Dennis said, I'm a senior PhD student at Emory University. I originally grew up in New York City, moved around a lot, and originally started with like a more of ecological focus. I was like, I love the plants, I love the animals, I want to study that. And then I moved into neuroscience my senior year of college, and I knew nothing about the brain, to be honest, but I was like, they told me the brain is where it's at. So I wanted to kind of explore. Originally, I was really interested in like bird song and like how animals are able to, have such flexible representation of bird song and be able to learn so much. But I ended up moving into like something completely different in my post-bac because that's what was available. And I kind of chose the mentor over the project in my post-bac. So I ended up studying the retina. It was really cool. I learned a lot about the retina. Still didn't know much about the brain, but the retina I knew a lot about. And then I moved after 2 years at my post-bac. I did that through NIH. And then I moved to Emory at Atlanta, Georgia. And like Dennis said, I study the reward system now, and I really love that, really in the context of social behavior. So kind of like in my head, still kind of harkening back to like what really brought me to science in terms of like really liking animal behavior, but more from the neuroscientific lens. So took a long time to get there, but I kind of circled the block on that idea. Been pretty involved in the beginning of my graduate career in a bunch of stuff, but kind of hunkering down at the end of my career because I have to graduate. And so mostly, hopefully, graduating in the spring and kind of toned back a lot of my volunteer or like my involvements, but I've been involved in like our version of like a representative committee and executive committee. I've done like seminars that I've been in charge of organizing. I've been involved in our graduates in neuroscience organizing body, curriculum committee, things like that. I entered my PhD in 2020, so at the height of the pandemic, but I've had mentees across almost every year since. And so I kind of have an understanding of like how things might have been changing since then. But just like as a tidbit in terms of like really specifics, like my experience was a little different going into my PhD.
Right. Thank you so much. Um, okay, so we have now 30 minutes. Hopefully, we can do it in 30 minutes or less. We have 5 questions that I'll be asking the panelists, and we'll just, you know, rotate it, and everybody gets a turn. And then after that, if time allows, we'll be looking into the chat and answering some of the questions live from the audience, and hopefully we can get to everything. So to begin, the first question is, how did you approach writing your personal statement or statement of purpose? And why don't we begin with Samantha?
Sure, I'm happy to start us off. For me personally, I think seeing a blank document might be a little daunting. And so I think the first thing that I did was I went back to previous applications that might have had something along the lines of a personal statement to remind myself of like when I talk about myself and who I am, kind of what are the things that I tend to focus on. And then specifically for applying to graduate school, I think it's important to also add your research journey in it. And I think some schools will ask for a personal statement and a statement of purpose. So sometimes these can look a little different. And I think how I organized mine was my personal statement was really about who I am, what brought me to research, and things that might not fit as tightly to a research journey. And so those I think are opportunities. If you have anything that you want to talk about that doesn't nicely fit into one of the application components, I think you can put those in your personal statement. And then the statement of purpose is I structured mine as my research journey starting in undergraduate, because that's my first significant research experience that I also talked about in other parts of my application. And then I ended it with why this school, why this specific program, and if there was room, I also would highlight specific faculty that I might be interested in working with. And also some connection to long-term career goals.
Okay. Yasmin.
Yeah, I think for me, I followed the same formula almost for my personal statement. Um, but once well, I know that I work best under a mentor, and I knew that going in. I realized that every big academic step I'd ever taken, I had done it under a support system and a mentor who had been in my corner. So I knew for this, I also needed a strong mentor to be there to guide me. So I applied to GSMI, GSMI, and my mentor helped me to refine my story because I wasn't sure what parts of it I wanted to emphasize in my personal statement because my research journey wasn't as linear as I had hoped that it would be. And I realized later that's like a very sort of normal experience, but I just needed help trying to structure it in a way that made it sound more purposeful. So, those meetings with my mentor were really helpful. And I actually what was helpful for me was drafting three different versions of my personal statement because my research interests were kind of broad and the lab research um, topics were more granular. So having those three different statements that I could work from to kind of tweak for each different lab that I was sending my app to. Um, so I think that was key as well because then I wasn't working from one master document and trying to change it every time. I had three different ones that I was tweaking based on like the subfield that it would fit under. And the other key part of that was that I got lots of feedback from different sources, but with a caveat, I was purposeful about who I got my feedback from because I didn't want too many cooks in the kitchen. Um, and I think that was hard for me to wrap my head around because I had always heard send your statement to anyone and everyone and get as much feedback as you possibly can. And my first round, I did that. And then my second round, I was like, I have to be more intentional about this time because there was too much noise in my head. Um, so long story short, each source that I asked for feedback from, I tried to match to their strengths. So I sent it to my college writing center, and that was mostly to check for like flow and writing style, grammar, things like that. And then I sent it to research mentors and older doc students who I was friends with who were in my research field to sort of assess more for research content and fit. And I would also give them specific questions about things that I was anxious about or had my doubts about. So I would be like, I would really appreciate your feedback on my statement. And I'm also not sure if the paragraph on this page is clearly showing my research fit, or am I thinking like a psychologist here? So, any specific questions that I had that were weighing on me, I would also ask them. So, I think that was pretty much the process of how I figured like writing my statements out.
Okay. Um, yeah, I think that's an interesting note about not having too many cooks in the kitchen. Um, yeah, I think we often don't think that there probably is an upper limit to how much feedback you need to be getting before it becomes detrimental almost. Um, Jarildy.
Yeah, I would echo what Samantha and Yasmin have said in terms of like the structure. I feel like my personal statement for each, I had like a boilerplate for that I would submit, and then I would always leave like the last paragraph to kind of and to explain my boilerplate. Like my like main version of each personal statement was I like to focus on like the because I had like kind of a twisty turny research path in the sense that like the research I was doing before my postbac was incredibly different to the research I was claiming to want to pursue in my PhD. I kind of assessed, if I was my own op, like what would be the thing that I kind of pick at in terms of like concern trying to enter my particular PhD program. And in my head, it was like, oh, maybe that I don't have like the right type of experience, or not even the right type, but rather like I need to be able to convince them like it doesn't really matter exactly what I've done before, but I'm really committed to seeing through the PhD going forward. Having talked to a lot of people on admissions teams now, the thing that they tend to be more concerned about rather than like an extensive amount of research experience, though always obviously always a plus, is like the thing that they want the research experience for is to know for sure that like you know what research is, you know what it entails, like the drag of like how the life goes, like the drag, like the things that like kind of put you down because they're like, I don't want to admit a student that like I'm setting up for failure because they don't actually have had the experience to know for sure that this is what they want. And so in my personal statement, I kind of tailored it to be like, these are the lessons that I've drawn from each of my experiences that really will strengthen my resolve and strengthen my resilience in order to pursue this PhD. And those lessons are applicable regardless of the actual research type or like the question that I was looking at. So I like kind of was like, what I kind of framed it more because I had so many vignettes that I wanted to talk about, and I'm, as you could tell, kind of a verbose person. I kind of went through and I was like, who do I want them to think that I am by the end of this personal statement? I want them to like believe these particular qualities and then selected vignettes that kind of reinforce those particular qualities. So I was like, I want them to know that I know what research is about. I know what I'm talking about when I say I want to do research. So I have to put in something like that. And I want them to know that I'm a resilient person because this PhD ain't for the weak. And so I was like, and I knew that going in. So I was like, I want to show them like this is where I have like shown real resilience. And I think I focused on like problem solving. And I was like, because I was coming in with not a background in the PhD I wanted to go in. I hadn't had classes in neuroscience like many of my applicant peers. I wanted to show like these are ways that I can show you that I can pick myself up in the bootstraps, so to say, and like actually like learn things even when I didn't necessarily come in with the same training as everyone else. And those were the vignettes that I kind of chose. And at the very end, I always went to explaining like how this particular university, this particular program was going to help that act. Like I was like, my goals are XYZ, and this is how you can help me do that. Shark Tank, please invest. It was very much like that idea because if you explain to them why it makes so much sense that like you are the right applicant, like you are the right person to be in this PhD, it's really easy cognitively to be like, I could see why this person would be a really easy yes to this program because I don't have to like in my head as a reviewer, I don't have to be like, oh, and this is how I can help you. They already told me like this is how they can help me. And so I usually went to like tip. I went to like where they have their where they boast about the program. And I was like, what do you think is important about the program? That's what I'm gonna say is important for the program because then now we're aligned. Do you see how we did that? And then also I went and looked at their mission statements, so if they had any, or like places where they showed like, like these are our values and kind of not made sure, but like kind of saw if I could like sprinkle in a one or two of those values throughout the personal statement. Mostly because I found that like it's really easy to be part of an in group when you already show yourself to have the same shared of value set. So I was like, it's going to be so easy for you to say that I belong here because I'm showing you all the ways in which I'm just like you. And also, I'm amazing. So you should say yes. And so that's kind of how I structured it. It also was a good temperature check for me when I was applying somewhere to see making sure that that was actually a program that could help. Because there were definitely places where I got caught off by like the name. And then I was like, oh my God, I could be Ivy League. But then I looked at like what they were advertising or like the values that they had, and I was like, I don't know. I don't know if this is exactly the right place for me. So it was also a good temp check for you to make sure that like you're applying to a place that does align with what you want in the future.
All right, thank you so much. We can now move on to question two, and we'll begin with Yasmin. How did you choose who to ask for letters of recommendation, and how did you go about asking them?
Yeah, that's a good question. It's a hard one too because I feel like my answer is personalized to me and it so I asked PIs who I had worked with for more than 1 year, and I think that's kind of like the ballpark that most people told me to follow. But I also know others who have worked with a PI for 6 months on a project and they were working with them every day. And it's pretty equivalent to like the work that others have done over the span of 1 to 2 years. So I feel like the timeline matters less than how much work you've done with a lab and how much you feel you got out of it and contributed as well. So I basically asked PIs who I felt like could speak to my character and my skills, like both of those things. And since schools usually ask for more than one letter, of course, it's usually like 3 to 5. My goal with my letters was to build like a cohesive picture of me so that each person was showing a different aspect of myself. So in psychology, it's really important to me as well because I work with more disenfranchised groups that I was showing my research skills from like a mixed method sort of perspective. So so one of my letters was with a PI who I had done more qual research with, and then the other one was more quant research, and the other one talked about more so my leadership skills, but there were more. So that's how the letters would differ, but there were still common threads through all three of those letters about my traits. So I kind of wanted commonalities that ran through my 3 letters or 4 letters actually, but also differences so that they were highlighting new parts of me that my CV or my statement was not showing. Um, so my letters became not just about like validating me as a person, but also a chance to like build my story and highlight parts of me that other parts of my application weren't. And showing like the meaningful bonds I had also built during that time. Um, in terms of like logistical planning, I tried to make it as easy as possible for my PIs who were writing my letters. So I asked really early, I asked in the summer, well, first telling them that I was thinking or that I was going to be applying that cycle to kind of plant that seed in their head so that when I did ask them, it wasn't like out of the blue. Um, and in my email to them, I would also kind of emphasize like the relationship that we had. Like, I think that you'd be a great person to ask for a letter because XYZ, like I worked on this project with you and I learned this and I did this to kind of like almost provide an outline of the rec letter for them. And I would also send them my list of schools, my CV, and my personal statement, even if it was a rough draft at that point. And I would tell them that I would follow up with a more final draft of it in in like a few weeks. Um, so that was basically the process of how I picked who I would ask and the actual asking part.
Awesome. Samantha.
And I think for me, I focus, or like my step one was that once I had my list of schools, I went to see like specifically what they put for their letters of recommendation because different schools will be looking for different letters and then also looking at their mission statement or like what they talk about in terms of the program. And I had different letter writers, so not all of mine wrote for the same schools. And I think that's something that you can think about if you're struggling between, oh, this one seems like a really good writer for school A, but I don't know that what they're going to talk about is something that school B will really prioritize. And so I think you should start with what are the schools looking for, and then who knows me best to talk about what Yasmin was saying, the different aspects of who you are as a person. In terms of how I went about asking, I think I asked all of mine through email. And one thing to think about if you're applying as a postbac or not right out of college is if you're a little worried about, will my professors remember me? Do I need to get more professors over research? It becomes a little bit more tricky because you might have the great problem of like too many mentors who could say great things about you. And I think the advice that I got was you definitely want to have strong research PI letters because all of these programs will be looking for, strong research ability and that you're going to be able to do a PhD. But also if you want one for to talk about your academic skills, personally, I ask people who I also did like an extracurricular or an activity outside of the class, whether that was a student organization, TAing for them, a place where we had regular FaceTime outside of me being in their class. And for me, in my emails, I put in the school, the deadline, specifically what this program is, and what I'm specifically hoping that they can highlight in their letters. And I think different writers have different expectations, but usually all of them will communicate if they're looking for you to provide more detail. And I think if you, depending on your relationship, there can also be, you can also ask in person, but it's always good to follow up with an email so that they have like the dates and all the information, and also how you're going to be sending them the recommendation, because it might be through a link for the school. So you want them to know to look out for that because it could go to their spam folder.
Yeah, both of those things were excellent. I haven't I don't have too much to add. I agree um with making sure that you're like reconnecting with people before you ask them for a rec. And I think you, if it's someone that you just talked to, like you don't need to do all that. But I before my postbac, I took 2 years off to build money because I had none. And if I wanted to move somewhere, I needed, to pay rent. So I had like $0 in a bank account. So I was like waiting tables and doing things like that for a while before I did my postbac. So it'd been like 4 years. I wanted to reconnect with like the people that I would ask in undergrad for recommendation letters. I offered to like hop on Zoom. I like sent my current CV. I like told them why I wanted to do my PhD, just because we hadn't had as much FaceTime as like my post-bac mentor and I had talked every day. So I think like offering those things can be helpful, because as someone who now has written recommendation letters, even when I taught someone like 2 years ago, I'm like, trying to remember specifics about them. I was like, imagine like a couple years, right? And so I think having just like more information and like the option, like offering like I can hop on Zoom, or if you're nearby, like we could catch a coffee, just so that if they want that, they'll do that. If not, they'll be like, I'm good on just your CV and your personal statement. That can be enough for someone to go on and write a strong rec. And I agree with Yasmin about like bringing a cohesive story about who you are through your recommendation letters, much like the personal statement. It's good sometimes, like especially if you haven't talked to someone in a while, being like, I would really love if you could talk about these particular aspects, like reminding them things that you've done, and then being like, if you could speak to like this ability, like I wrote that. I feel like that might, maybe some people think that's overstepping, but I wrote that in my emails just to like make it as easy as possible to say yes to writing the recommendation letter. And I did, because I was applying to a lot of schools. I like made like a table, and I was like, this is the school, this is like the program. And I was like, how are you going to get it? Is like link, is it email, is it like I'll send it to you, and like the deadline. And I put a deadline that was like a couple hours earlier than the actual deadline for every single person. I made a little white lie, because I knew there was a couple of my recommendation letter writers who would for sure make it late. And I was like, I'm not trying to play those games. So I like moved the deadline. Like if it was due at midnight, I would do it at like 5 p.m. Just like to give myself the wiggle room. And I would tell people like, these are like my please submit by timeline, because things crash. Like there's a lot of things that could happen down to the wire. And as a person who tends to be down to the wire, I was like, I understand all the things that could happen. And to prevent stress on my side and also on your side, here is a better deadline. And it actually was helpful, because someone was like, oh my God, my computer died right at the deadline. And I was like, it's okay, girly, it's in 6 hours. So I was like, it worked out. But I think making sure that you're communicating and making sure it's as easy as possible, and frequent reminders if necessary. Things, like it's hard sometimes to like remember that you have to submit a whole rec letter for people. So making sure like as we're getting closer to the deadline, being like, hey, it's 2 weeks out. As a reminder, these are the ones you have left, or like this is the way to submit it. Let me know if I can hop on Zoom and explain it to you. Like I was like, let me make it as easy as possible. So in terms of like actual logistics, I think that really does help people when you like outline everything in like one email, so they can just like pin it to their inbox and see it frequently.
Great, thank you. So we have 3 questions left, and it is 9:40. Um, I'm going to challenge the panelists. While everything has been great and we've been having very insightful um, contributions and answers, I think let's challenge ourselves to 60 seconds or less on our responses so that we can have some time at the end for fielding questions. All right. So question 3, and we could begin with Jadi. How did you build relationships with potential advisors or mentors before applying? And did you apply with, if it applies to you, did you apply with a specific research advisor or lab in mind?
I definitely looked up people and put them in my personal statement. Like, this is the interest that I'm interested in, and these are mentors that I'm interested in. I put that in my personal statement. And I didn't necessarily, all of the places I applied to were rotation based. And so it wasn't like I was going to go in with a particular PhD mentor, but I wanted them to know that I was serious. That's one. In terms of going in for the recommendation letter writers and building relationships, for recommendation letter writers, I would make sure if I knew I wanted to have someone in the future, I would ask them for some time, like 20 minutes, a coffee, whatever, and be like, I just want to get your feedback on XYZ thing about a career that I'm interested in. That gives them time to build rapport with you and also get to know you on like not just like this is a person in the hallway, but rather this is like a person that I'm now engaging in a mentorship role with. In terms of like having been on the other side as a professor, I would say like the going to office hours and like asking just for their time, even if it's 20 minutes, gives a little bit of understanding. And I'm like, oh, I immediately am like, this person cares because they're asking. So those would be the 2 quick answers.
Thank you. Jasmine.
Yeah, so I 100% had a research advisor and lab in mind. So in clinical and counseling psychology, you're not only applying to the program, you're being accepted into a specific lab. So there's no rotations that we do. And there's little room for switching your PI once you're accepted into a lab. So that being said, I didn't reach out to potential advisors prior to sending my application in. In clinical psychology, especially, I've heard from a lot of PIs that they get hundreds of emails asking to meet with them prior. So I basically was like, this adds a lot of stress on me, and they're probably not even going to see my email. So I veered on the side of letting my application speak for me. And if they were interested in me, then the interview would be my chance to talk with them and ask more questions. So that's basically how I went like about that.
Thank you. And Samantha.
Yes, I also was applying to research or rotation-based programs, and I did not specifically reach out to any PIs beforehand, but definitely I had a list of anywhere from like 3 to 5 faculty for each of the schools that I was applying to, and I think that's important that when you're looking at schools, like you can list off at least 3 to 5 faculty that you would be interested in, and I think another thing to consider as maybe funding is becoming a more important factor is you can look up faculty funding even if they don't put it on their website. It's called NIH Reporter, like reporter and then ER, and it'll list all of their NIH funding. And that's something that you can look into to really be like, because it might be hard to send that in an email asking a PI if they have funding, but you can go and look, and that can help you if you have either the problem of not enough faculty or too many faculty, of filtering it down to something. Yes, yeah, Jari just put the link in. And in terms of building relationships, if you're able to go to any conference beforehand, I think that you can take that brave, bold step and send cold emails, and you might be surprised by PI's willingness to meet with you or to come check out your poster since they'll be at that conference. And it might be a way to have an informal FaceTime and get to know school during the same cycle.
Awesome. So question 4, and we will begin with Samantha. What was your experience like during interviews or recruitment weekends? Did anything surprise you? What helped you stay motivated or manage self-doubt?
My interview experience was a mix of Zoom interviews and in person. I think that for the most part, the format is roughly the same for most schools. You'll have 3 to 5 faculty one-on-one interviews that will probably last around 30 minutes, and it's structured where they might ask you about yourself, your research, what are you interested in, and then they'll talk about their research program, and then there'll be like a Q&A or like a discussion until the end of the time. You might have the opportunity to meet with the program directors. There might be some student interviews. If it's in person, some lab tours, kind of seeing the campus, the buildings. I think the two surprising things was that even though it's easy to see some of these things as social, everything in that interview time that weekend is an interview. And everyone from the students to the directors, they're all assessing you in terms of from an interview perspective. And probably a factor that by the time you get an interview invite, the most important thing I think that they're going to look at from how do they distinguish who they give an offer to is going to be fit. So they want to know not only are you looking for their program because you could really see yourself there and that it would be a good fit, but that you want to go here and that you're really interested in their program. And it's not just, oh, in case I don't get into this school, then I would go here. Like you really want to convey that this is my number one school.
Oh, wait, sorry. Did you say my name? I just didn't hear it.
Oh, let's go with you. I actually said Jadi, but let's go with Yasmin
Oh,
since
sorry.
it's all
All
right.
right, no, it's okay. You can go.
You're already unmuted.
Okay. Um, so I did both online and in-person interviews, and I surprisingly found the online ones to be way more tiring and exhausting for some reason. I went in thinking I'll be able to have my notes up. I can glance at them if I need to. Um, but I found it hard to be on all the time. Um, and not being able to see the campus as well, which was a huge factor, which I realized later in the in-person interviews. Um, but I think what was most surprising to me was how capable I actually was. I think my first interview day, I was so anxious and I was like, this is going to be an impossible feat. And then like interview 2 out of 8, like it's such a long day. It's like you're interviewing from like 9 to 6 p.m. After interview like 2, I was like, oh, it's easier to talk about myself and my research. And I think it's quite surprising how quickly your confidence builds. But the biggest piece of advice I got actually from my GS, my mentor, was see the faculty as your future colleagues, not as gatekeepers. And I think that mindset helped lower or shift the power, like differential that I had placed on them in my head. Like they are doctors and I'm just a measly grad student, but also like I'm applying to be a doctor in the future and they're going to be my colleague. And I think that helped lessen the self-doubt and the sort of anxiety that I had, and that the interview became more of a chance for me to see if it was a good fit as well, and not trying to prove that I belong there all the time. So it kind of helped shift that power structure for me a little bit.
Great, Jadi.
Yeah, what Samantha and Yasmin have said, I definitely feel is relatable and accurate to like my interview experience. I did mine in person. I will say, like, now a lot of universities have moved towards online interviews plus in-person accepted students weekend, which is like also the case, has been the case for like more engineering type of PhD programs. So a lot of biomedical scientists have kind of moved into that direction, mostly because of the penny and also because of saving money. Um, I would say so. In that, I also agree with Yasmin. What I've noticed on the other side is that, yeah, all the interviewees get really, really exhausted being online all day. So if people say like there's a break time, I would definitely close your eyes and go do something else and take those breaks. And I agree with Yasmin. I would say like as a way of a stay motivated and manage your self-doubt. If you're getting an interview, you already are like at the top of their list. Like people get a lot of applications. And so the fact that you even get an interview already means like we really want you. And what they're really looking for is things at that point like fit, and if you have any like major red flags, like are you a crazy person? Which is I think more what the like in-person accepted students thing is for. Usually in terms of like our graduate student feedback, at least at Emory, it tends to be like this person actively punched someone, or like the student said that they actually don't want to go here. No one's ever punched anyone, but I'm saying like those would be the things we report. Or if someone is, yeah, like Samantha said, like if someone is like, yeah, I'm actually don't care about this school at all, then we would say that, so that someone's acceptance doesn't get given to that person and that person's going to reject it anyway. And sometimes, like by the time you've gotten to your accepted students, people have multiple offers and they kind of have a feeling about where they're gonna go. And so in those cases, that's kind of more like where we might come in. Like it's not like that, like those would be the big red flags that we would have to report. Anything like I just didn't like them, that usually doesn't mean anything to the faculty because they're like, okay, I don't like you. And so it's kind of like I would not be worried about like feeling like you're being constantly evaluated, but I would be on your best behavior because I've definitely seen people like, for example, there tends to be open bars, and a drink or two if you imbibe is like chill. Maybe don't get wasted. Like it like feels a little inappropriate, and it sounds crazy to say out loud, but like people do feel very comfortable because grad students are like super chill. But I would just like you know be on like behavior you would be at like a friend's plus one of a wedding. Like you don't want to be like crazy, but you want to have a good time. And so I wouldn't view the grad students as like necessarily constantly like evaluating you. But I would use them as like your guides for like really understanding what the school is like. Grad students will tend to, not always, but tend to tell you the truth. And so I would also use your interview time anytime you're talking to the grad students. Ask questions about like culture, things like that. Like they tend to tell you a little bit more than the faculty will.
Okay, perfect. Question five, looking back, what do you wish you had known about the admissions process? What advice do you want to give applicants regarding admissions? And we can begin with Jadi.
I would say that one thing that's important to note is like I think a lot of people really get bogged down in like the that first round of responses. I think especially now, there's a lot of uncertainty in terms of like applying to grad school, and grad school programs themselves are trying their best to make sure that if they accept someone in the program, they're not making false promises. So I wouldn't, as much as you can, though this is a plight of all academics, I really would not see any response. Let's say you don't get interviews, or you only get one interview. I would say like try your best to like not depersonalize, but like not take it as like a hit on your own value as a human, and like as a person in this field, whether or not you get a response from any university that you find favorable. Obviously, we've talked about like you're going to make it to the end, and I'm manifesting everyone makes it to their acceptance. But I do remember a lot of people playing the comparison game in terms of like, for example, especially on interview weekends, people, you talk to your peers, like knowing people got into certain schools and you didn't, and trying to like figure out and hack like what is it about them that isn't me. And I just really wouldn't play that game at all because sometimes it is like it's imperceptible. It's something that like maybe not even the admissions. I would like go into it being like, it is what it is. Like, I have to accept all possibilities of what this process is. I mean, that's like a thing of life in general. And being like, that response doesn't mean anything about myself. It means more like, this just so happened to be my lot, and there is always another admission cycle, right? And so, like, I would just like, I wouldn't get bogged down because I did see a lot of people getting stressed out about that. And it kind of does hamper your ability to stay confident in yourself as you go in. I always say, like, you only need one yes. Like, all of the places you apply should be places that you would love to go to. You shouldn't apply to any school that you're like, I actually would not want to go there if I got in. That's like a waste of your time. I would really only pick places that you know that you'd be really happy to go to, and then like at least at the application stage. And not being afraid that if you got that one yes for interview and you go there, you get bad vibes. 5 years is a long time. I would just not go. I wouldn't go there. If you really feel like you don't like, don't be afraid of saying no, because it's if it's the opportunity isn't right for you, then that wasn't the yes you were meant to make. So I would also don't be afraid to say no. Those places, I always say, continue to exist. If you want to go there later, I felt that way about Colombia. I wanted to go. I got really weird vibes during the grad school. You might not, but that wasn't the place for me. And I told myself, I can go there for my postdoc if I really want to go there later, right? Like, those places will continue to exist after I say no to them. Like, it's okay. So I would keep yourself and your values and your worth as like the top tier, most important thing going through the process.
Great. Uh, Yasmin.
Yeah, I want to echo that as well. I think for me, or um, I think the biggest piece of advice would be intentional about scheduling time for joy now more than ever. Be very intentional about rest, spending time with others that fills your cup. The process is really hard and very, very exhausting in lots of ways. Um, Emotionally, financially, mentally. So just know that, but also know that it's not impossible and that you will get through it. So find your support system and keep your why front and center. So to kind of help ground you. So always remember, why am I doing this? And make sure that that reason is very explicit and clear to you, because you're going to have to think about it very often through the process. And just last two little tidbits. I think it's very normal to never feel 100% ready. And I would have probably not applied for 2 to 3 years more had I not had other mentors who were able to kind of reflect my readiness to me. And they were like, no, we think you should be applying this cycle because you are ready. And had I had not had those like outside sources and voices who I value pushing me, I probably would have waited too long. And just the last thing, there's rarely ever a perfect fit. Like, like Achilles heel the first time I was waiting for a program that would be the perfect fit. And I realized, oh, I don't know if I want to go through this process twice. So I said yes to a program that felt like it was the best option out of the ones that I had gotten into, that had felt like a good fit on paper. But then I went to interview day and other things, and I realized more things about the programs. But so don't compromise on what truly matters to you, and do a lot of soul searching when that time comes.
Right, and then finally, we can have Samantha answer this question.
Yes, and I'll also tailor this specifically to anyone who's like currently going through the cycle, because I think a lot of this process can feel out of your control and that there's only so much you can do. And I think one thing that's really important is I think I would be very organized about this. I think Jari shared some of her tips that she did when she was applying. Definitely like saving things with like clear, this is what I submitted for this school, and this was my personal statement, this was my state of purpose. Because when you go to interviews, anything that you put in your application will be fair game, and you do not want them to be asking you things where you're like, wait, what did I put? What is that? And so it's also helpful when you're if from when you submitted to when your interview is, if there's a big gap, to remind yourself, okay, what did I tell this school? Why was I interested in this school? And all of that process can be a lot easier if you are organized, you save your files with clear names. And I think that's something, if you're currently applying, that you can just make sure that you've got everything saved. So when those interview invites come, you can review and then you can go in feeling really good.
Thank you. Thank you so much. All right. So we are actually at time. Um, we had a couple of questions in the Q&A, and we are getting typed answers. So thank you so much to the panelists answering these questions. I see Samantha was typing away at many of those. So this is perfect because now we have nothing left in the Q&A. So it seems everybody has gotten their fill. Um, and I hope that it was just very insightful to, all of our attendees this morning. Thank you so much to the panelists for agreeing to be here. And it was, it was an early start, getting right to work here. So I really appreciate that. And I wish everybody has a good day. And to the attendees, maybe we'll see you in an hour at the faculty panel. Thanks again. Bye-bye.
Thanks. Bye, everyone.
Thanks, y'all.
Thank you. Bye.